everyone. Welcome to this special Feedstuffs 365 weather report. Greg Soulje is back with us, meteorologist, and you're talking snow as far as Texas
Yeah,
and Gulf area. And
yeah.
oh my goodness. And then I know up here in the Midwest, at least some deep freeze. We're going into some really cold weather. So tell us what we need to be prepared for as we move into this next week.
Okay, we'll kind of set the stage here, and of course, we'll have details on what's happened over this past weekend on this weekend's edition of This Week in Agribusiness and what's expected as well. We'll kind of set the stage on what we call in the weather business a transpolar flow. That means air coming off eastern Russia, Siberia, if you will, crossing the polar region, then running right down the chute along the Canadian Rockies, heading south all the way down, to the Gulf Coast. And anytime you take that kind of up air flow, and we talked about this on our get-togethers on the podcast here about the polar vortex. It seemed to, for some reason, folks think they coined it a few years ago. It's always been in the meteorology nomenclature. It's there in wintertime. Sometimes it goes as far south, and normally it ought to be in the St. Lawrence River Valley. Sometimes it backs up into the Great Lakes. That's when we get into our cold air through the Corn Belt. Sometime and all the time in summertime, it's up near the polar region. In any event, that's going to get dislodged, and we're just going to run that air from Siberia across the pole through the Northwest Territories of Canada and bleed it southward. No major winter systems per se for the Midwest, but there's probably a bit here. We'll put this in perspective. There's a better chance, Sarah, of accumulating snow and ice. And remember, we had this issue 3 or 4 years ago where we actually put down accumulating snow and ice all the way to Galveston, Houston, New Orleans. And we think later in the week, Pensacola and Jacksonville may see at least a little snow, some freezing rain. And if you go inland, a parish or two, as they call it in Louisiana, or some of the counties in through Texas, obviously big livestock. But, those confinement areas aren't fit for really no more than a heavy downpour of rain. So if you were to put a few inches of wet packing snow or ice on top of that, plus the power issues, you've got some issues that may be playing out once again, much like we had a few years ago into southeastern and eastern Texas along the Gulf Coast in through Florida at some point for next week down there.
Are you adding some wind into that as well? Because, you get that pressure on those roofs.
Yep.
And you get some wind in there, and that can be just not a good thing.
Not a good thing, not only for the roofs, but the power lines as well. Not anything that would scale a traditional Midwestern blizzard, but, 20, 25, 30, 35 miles per hour, which is very much in the realm of likelihood will certainly play out. And I think the worst of it, if you had to put some sense of a timestamp on it, and we will have talked about this on the weekend TV show, This Week in Agribusiness, probably into Monday, Tuesday, maybe just outside of Brownsville, Texas, Galveston, Houston, up along the Gulf Coast, maybe Tuesday night into Wednesday. New Orleans gets a few flakes of snow or a little bit of freezing rain as well. And then at some point late next week, if things work out correctly here, there may be a couple of reports of some snow and ice as far south as Pensacola and Florida. So, if you come up with that kind of winter precept, well, those winter vegetable areas, that South Texas citrus, which is roughly from it's right along the Rio Grande down to about Brownsville and back up. That's a freeze possibility. Now, I'm not sure where things are tree-wise out right now down there, but there may be some burn back or some issues on vegetation there. And then obviously winter vegetable crops or cover crops that are underway across the Gulf Coast, the southeastern states, and or pasture lands as well. Those will have to be watched in the coming days. But this will be record setting and probably one for the books, as they say down there. Maybe not quite the longevity and the severity that they had in that area about 4 or 5 years ago, but enough certainly to get their attention down there and our attention up here.
They've been talking this week, actually, before we start talking about this, but other reports are saying that, it's been really a relatively mild, warm winter. And, what's that going to mean for crop production? But sounds like we might be making up for that here coming up shortly.
Yeah, it's been really just up and down, these wide swings, wide ranging temperatures any given day. We have an idea what average or normal is. And that also applies to the Midwest. What we had drought improvement on Thursday's drought monitor, another round of improvement coming off some of the December rains, would you believe, and late November, December rains over a good part of the central and southern Corn Belt. areas. And yeah, it's been back and forth. It was a warm, almost record-setting month of December and fall season with warmth in mind over the Gulf Coast, the southeastern states, pendulum swinging back in the other direction. And we'll talk about it on the 4-week forecast on this weekend's TV show, where we do foresee that warmth. It's hard to believe we're talking snow and ice down there, but give it about 10 days, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, there is a significant pattern shift back to warmer over the immediate southeast and Gulf Coast area. No big warm up for the heartland, for the plains and Corn Belt. Matter of fact, for folks and it has been kind of a snow deficit in some areas. Even with the storm of a couple of weeks ago in the central and southern Corn Belt, Central Plains, signs that we're going to make up for that going forward. But I tell you, I certainly hope folks are taking heed to some of those thoughts and talks down there about winter weather down there. I haven't seen any advisories come in from the National Weather Service so far across the Gulf Coast, but that's why we're here, to beat them to the punch.
Let you know what's going to happen. It'll be interesting to see your snow map next week.
I was thinking,
update that. That could be cool to see.
Yeah, I was thinking when I was putting the maps together, and I telling Mike, says, I put snow down here just to let you know. So, and so, yeah. And my froggy voice of the TV show, you'll hear about it. But and that precip chart as well. I think I'll just put a couple of snowflakes on there and a couple of snow showers, see if anybody is paying attention here. So interesting weather, to say the least, down there for the snowbirds. You've got to go out of the country, or you really got to go out of the country to escape anything on resembling wintertime around here. And at least there is, it's another, speaking of getting out of the country or getting away from the rough stuff, probably late next week before we finally see a significant break off of that Southern California Santa Ana windstorm. It's eased up for now. It'll ramp up over the weekend, early next week, as this cold air once again southward. But ongoing story with dryness and drought out there this rest of the winter season.
Yeah, and you gave us a great winter and spring update here on Feedstuffs 365 a couple days ago. If you want to go back and check that out, it's certainly available in on demand. So anyone who's interested can check that out. That's a longer range forecast that Greg brings to us every month. So and then we have these updates we've started.
When they give me time on TV, we put it on TV. But you know what? If it doesn't get on TV, this is the place it's going to turn up. So
there we go.
On demand.
So I think the winds might have let up a little bit in California. Is that what I was seeing, or are we still in that situation out there?
It's the pattern really. It's such a delicate situation out there. But a good way to measure when it ramps up out there is when here in the Midwest we get into these real supercharged cold wave weather patterns, and we've had these cold outbreaks here for a couple of weeks. If that's going on here, the weather works in a wavy up and down pattern, the steering current. So if the winds are bending down this way, they're bending up or ridging, as we call it in the western and southwestern part of the country. So high pressure builds up there. The air gets so built up, it sinks, it compresses. And when you see that occur, somewhere around Salt Lake City, so remember, it's a clockwise flow around a high. And then ultimately, when these systems come out of the Gulf, or actually, I should say Baja California and Old Mexico, lows are counterclockwise. So you're marrying up the same wind field, two separate weather systems. Then they rush down. Folks who work in the equipment business, engine shops, thermodynamics, if you sink a gas or compress a gas, it warms up. Same applies to atmospheric thermodynamics. And so the same principle goes on in California. Then you throw into it, and I saw the stat this morning. Here it is. LAX Airport, 1/1600ths of an inch of rain since May 16th. 1/1600ths of an inch of rain in San Diego since same thing, May 16th. So that puts it at so far just 3% of normal precipitation for the time frame from mid-May of 2024 here into mid-January of 2025. No wonder, it goes for the wrong reason. When it goes down there. And so that's going to be a developing thing. I think the Sierra range ranges from about 85% normal snow cover up towards San Francisco, or at least a Bima there, and northward to just 5% of normal in the mountains outside of LA. And again, that Southern California area is as well as a big irrigation part of the country. So there's such a range, a dichotomy of snow amounts and runoff prospects and drought It's a little microclimate that's playing out across California at the current time. So that's going to be another, that east-northeast wind's going to pick up at some point as those lows come out of Mexico and across the Gulf Coast early to mid next week. So we're not done with the headline issues out there in California, as in maybe resparking maybe some of those fires early next week.
Very good. All right. Well, thank you for the update. We'll be
Thank
back
you.
with you next week to find out how things are going, how far south that snow gets.
Yeah, I'm sure there'll be, I'll find a way to, temper it as best I can on radio and warn people accordingly. And hopefully we can find a pattern shift around here to something better for everywhere across the country. So we'll check in with you next week.
Very good. Thank you, Greg.